Welcome to everyone. My name is Benedict Parmanand. I'm the co-founder of Bangalore Business Literature Festival. Uh, we started this new book, new chat 3 months back. This is the third edition. We had two very successful first two editions. The first edition was with Pawan Soni and his book, terrific book. It's called Design Your Thinking, the mindsets, tool sets, and skill sets for creative problem solving. The second book, again, another terrific book. It was more in the investigative reporting genre. It was by Pawan Lal, and the title of the book was Yes Man, The Untold Story of Rana Kapoor. It was about the S Bank scam. I'm happy to welcome Professor Seema Gupta, Alap Ghosh, and Rini Dutta to this third edition. Welcome.
Thank you.
And welcome to the audience. We have a healthy number right now. I'm sure that number will go up. So my role here is just to introduce the new book, new chat, and then introduce Rini, and then Rini will host the session today. So new book, new chat. We started uh, 3 months back. The logic behind that was that new authors don't get a platform to promote their book and to connect with readers. So instead of annual festivals where we put together 20, 25, 30 authors, where we get to give opportunity to the well-known authors. So new authors tend to lose out. So there's an initiative on that, and it's doing well. I'm sure it will get better. Uh, I'm happy to introduce Rini Dutta. First and foremost, she's a good friend of Bangalore Business Literature Festival right from the beginning. Uh, she's a volunteer as well. Uh, she's an IMC grad and has worked with Unilever, Arvind Brands, and Titan Eye. Uh, After the entrepreneurial bug hit her, she started on her own. Her company is called Centric Brand Advisors. Uh, she has pretty unique way of working as well. She calls herself a happy workaholic. I don't think I've not heard that anyone say before. And she loves cats. Over to Rini. I hope you all enjoy the day, enjoy the session.
So thank you guys for that very nice introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here. And as I was saying, I love the book. I like to read, and I've just started reading nonfiction during the lockdown, a lot of it. And I often find books which are great to read, but they're sometimes not practical. So I'm delighted to be here to be part of a book discussion on how people buy online with two bona fide experts on digital marketing and digital sales, because ultimately both go hand in hand. So today we are going to be speaking to Professor Seema Gupta. Many of you are already aware of her. In fact, when I posted about this session on LinkedIn, people are like, yeah, I know Seema. I've seen her blogs. I've seen her videos. So Seema is a bona fide digital marketing expert. She's been a professor at IIM Bangalore. She taught students there about digital marketing, marketing communication. And prior to that, even at MICA, she did a lot of work in Marcom, including events and PR. So Seema knows not just traditional marketing, but digital marketing. And she also works as a consultant corporate trainer, working with companies across sectors like John Distilleries, Urban Brands, 3M, and many more, getting their digital marketing in place. She's won a bunch of prestigious awards like the ISB Ivy Best Case Study Award, as well as the EFMG Best Global Case Writing Award. And as I said before, many of you already know of her because she's a prolific blogger and she covers topics which are very, very important, like the basics of social media marketing, SEO, Google AdWords, and much more. Today, we are going to talk about Seema's amazing book on how people buy. It's published by Sage Media. And the book is very relevant today because the entire world is shifting to e-commerce, brought upon by the pandemic and subsequent lockdowns. And we'll see more of it in our country as well. And for the sake of today's conversation, because the book is a very very comprehensive book, we will cover the subjects in the book in three broad categories. The first one is the psychology behind why people buy and how they can be influenced to buy our brand. The second one is the drivers for online purchase, moving beyond stereotypes. The last are some practical aspects related to online marketing, for example, pricing, promotion, communication, and much more. Joining us today, very importantly, is Alap Ghosh. Now, while Seema is going to bring a huge amount of depth into the conversation and a lot of training and practical experience will also come from Alap. Alap is the managing director of Jellyfish India. He has 2 decades of Marcom and, more importantly, 15 years as a hardcore digital marketing. He's another recognized expert here today because he's been working not just for Jellyfish, but he's previously worked in companies like Group M, Comlo, Active Media. Plus, he ran his own outfit, the Syntropic Systems, which helped many brands get their digital strategy and execution pathway in place. More importantly, for all of us, he is a certified trainer for digital marketing and a visiting professor at IIM Bangalore. I mean, I guess that's where the two experts got to know each other. And Alap's worked for over 250 companies changing their digital strategy. So I'm hoping that Alap's going to bring a lot of ground-up approach to using best practices in online marketing. And, I'm hoping to learn a lot. And please remember, in today's conversation, because it's a conversation, we're going to ask questions. So if any of you have any questions, please message us on this chat thing, and I will try to get our experts to answer them. And without going any further, I'm going to dive right into the book on how people buy online. And the first question to you, Seema, is in your first few chapters, you speak extensively of the science behind why people buy. Now, a lot of people think buying is driven by rational stuff like price or availability and stuff, and to some extent branding. But your book shows that there is much more. So, can you share some of your perspectives on that, please?
Thanks. Thanks, Rini. And thanks, Benedict, for giving this opportunity. So, welcome to all the participants. We look forward to having an engaging session. It will be semi formal. So, feel free to ask questions. So, what I realized is that basically, humans, we have three types of brain. So, one is we have old brain. So, old brain is very primitive and it actually dominates the decision making. So people feel that we are very rational and our purchase decisions are very logical, but nothing can be farther from the truth. So we are driven more by the primitive brain, and primitive brain is driven more by fear appeal. So unless the fears of the primitive brain, old brain, they are addressed, people are not going to buy. Now, fears can be very basic, like what if I make the payment and the product is not delivered? What if I'm not happy with the quality of the product? What if I'm not able to return the product? So any e-commerce company, if they want to succeed, they have to address these primitive fears. After the barriers of primitive brain is handled, the second brain which plays an important role is the middle brain, and it is driven by emotions. So you have to evoke emotions. People have to like you. They have to have some affinity with the brand, with the owners of the company. Then only they will go ahead and buy. And then comes logic. So all these three have to come in together. Then only people will go ahead and buy. So features, you have to talk about trust, testimonials. We have to evoke emotions. And emotions, there are so many. We can leverage on any emotion. For example, Cadbury's is leveraging love as an emotion. So what emotion as a brand can be central to us? And then ultimately talk about features, benefits, and how all these three have to come together.
Thanks a lot, Seema. That was like amazing. I just want to announce once again that before we go into the second question, a big thank you to Airmeet as our platform partner and Caleb as our library partner. So the reason why I'm saying this is that when Seema was talking, I started typing out some of the points which you mentioned just now, which is I thought that was really cool because in Airmeet we can type and share as we go along. So I'm seeing some questions, but I also like to share that I thought this was really cool that you're saying there are three ways we process information. and it's beginning with the reptile brain and then going into the neocortex. Any points on this, Alap, before we go into the next question from a practical perspective? Because most of us don't think like that when we have a business challenge.
So, since we are talking about consumers and what motivates consumers, there's one point that at least I would like to add to what Seema said, is that there has been a consistent degrowth in the market research industry over the past few years. And the reason that has happened is because social media has made people so conscious about the answers that they give that there is a constant desirability bias that exists. So sometimes when people talk about how they want to purchase or what's their motivators of purchase, they're no longer trustable when it comes to cognitive market research methods. And therefore, what most marketers these days need to do is to rely on data that comes from behavioral signals and understand how people behave versus what they say and what they express their attitudes, because there is a distinct difference between how people think versus how people act, especially in the times of social media and now further in the times of a pandemic. That's my addition to what Seema just said. I think what Seema said is really powerful.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm going into my next question, and this one's to you, Alap. In the book, uh, there's a lot about profiling of people and how they buy on online channel. I'll be frank, for many of us who are not digital experts like you guys, many of us believe in the stereotype. Online shopping is by people who are looking for discount. Online people is for convenience. But in this book, Seema has blown these stereotypes out, where she's actually talked about the psychology of digital buyer. So I was hoping, could you share your thoughts on what drives people to e-commerce from a ground up? Because you work for so many companies, and it's not obviously just price and convenience. So I'd really like you to share some thoughts on it, and then maybe Seema could layer it with, some further thoughts. So over to you.
The lockdown has taught us to speak when mute is on. Uh, Now, there are many reasons, and I honestly cannot quantify the reasons because we're discovering new ones every day. Cost and convenience were attributes that we imported from other businesses that we saw successful. For example, the very early pure play internet companies in India were all copycats of Western business models that spoke about convenience. Now, we were very quick to realize that in India, convenience is an add-on that we don't really seek. Convenience is something that comes along and is not really expected, which means if someone has to pay less and invest more time in doing something, they'll happily invest their time because the value of time is easier and cheaper than the value of actual currency. For most people of our income backgrounds. Now, when we talk about subtle motivators that we are not really thinking about when it comes to e-commerce, one of the things that e-commerce offers is anonymity. When you go into a store, there are a lot of people that have psychological barriers that prevent them from either approaching or being approached by another human being. We usually take these things for granted. One very easy example I could give was online ordering was a boon for women, because what women realized is they don't have to go through an uncomfortable conversation. For non-native speakers in other states, an uncomfortable conversation on the phone, getting your order wrong, the frustration of getting your order wrong, all of those things were removed. So sometimes it's less about convenience and more about the security that a person feels that I will get things right and I don't have to have an unnecessary human interaction. I think that in itself was a massive motivator. Another motivator was pace, where you can't do what you can do on e-commerce in a brick and mortar store. You can never go inside, come out, and then go back in after a few minutes because somebody made you a phone call. You're there, you're time bound, you have to go back to wherever it is that you came from. So you have to make it a very tactical visit. And unless if it's a mall, if it's something that's compulsive, obviously you're going in and you're spending time. Now, e-commerce allows you the convenience of going in, starting an experience, pausing, adding things to cart. They will stay there even 2 months after you come back. There is a lot of convenience that comes along with the systems remembering you and who you are. These are obviously mimicked in retail stores when there are salespeople who remember and note down which high value customers came in. But e-commerce just does it better at a much larger scale and gives the same personalization to people who are probably less important to that business from a wallet size perspective. So I think the pace for a consumer to go in and not be rushed, not have to wait for a trial room, imagine how clothes are looking on them, that there are conveniences, rather there are pace conveniences where people are allowed to take their time with their decision. This reduces purchase regret, one of the biggest problems of e-commerce, because people are just allowed to breathe into the transaction, not rushed into one. And obviously, there are platforms like Amazon that offer you returns, so people seek those so that if they make a mistake, they can roll back. Yeah, I think these two are usually forgotten and should be remembered.
Any points, Seema?
While I was researching for my book, what I realized is that people don't buy to satisfy needs. People buy to satisfy desires. So if the marketing is oriented towards desires rather than needs, then it is likely to yield better results. Many studies have shown that as much as 60% of the products that we buy, we don't subsequently use.
Really?
Yeah. So we end up buying things we don't need. So number one thing for a marketer is how do we orient our customers and our marketing so people shop for desire. Number two, it is a myth that people do online shopping because it will save time. So, of course, convenience is there. People don't have to walk into a brick and mortar store. But the convenience in terms of saving time is not necessarily true because we don't realize how much time has lapsed. So, we keep on searching for information, we go for reviews, ratings, we spend a lot of time in doing search for information, and why we don't realize that so much time has passed by is because of the blue light which is emitted. So all these devices, we are aware, they emit blue light, and blue light will interfere with melatonin, which is the chemical which will induce sleep and fatigue. So while we are consuming content on devices, we don't realize that this melatonin is getting released. And so we don't feel tired, we don't feel that fatigue, and we keep on spending more and more time. So online shopping definitely is very different. People shop for desire, and it is a myth people save time.
Okay, sounds good. So I have a quick question, which I think will fit right in. It's been asked by my friend Vinay Rao, the VP Marcom of Impulses, which is a health tech company, and it's doing a lot of exciting work. So here's a question which perhaps you could answer straight away: is does gender play a big role in impulse buying online? My husband will say yes, but I just wanted to check if that's really the case.
I am not aware of any studies which have proven that either gender is more amenable to impulse buying. But impulse buying works. So in marketing, there are two paradigms. One is pull marketing, and another is push marketing. So push marketing is you provide stimulus to users, and they act on it. So they are not seeking themselves, but when they are presented with the stimulus, they may take some action, and it works because people don't know what they really need. So if you ask people what you need, they are not able to describe because many needs are latent. And impulse buying is basically capturing those latent needs. So that's why ads work, because when people are shown, especially in the form of imagery, so when people see products, when people see other people who are happily using those products, then the desire gets stimulated and it leads to buying.
Okay. I think that's a very diplomatic answer, but we'll go with it. Uh, the next question was actually originally for you, Seema, but you can also chip in, Alap, and I think it also answers the question which has been written by another person on our platform. It's basically there's an entire chapter in your book on how do you get people to say yes. And I thought that was really awesome because online, as you said, it's a complex process. As Alap says, there are things like purchase regret, there are emotional factors which we are not aware of. So how do you get people to say yes? And the reason I'm asking this is there's a question from Mr. Murli, the CEO of Clip Technologies, our partner right now, who's asked a very interesting question. And I think you could also answer that in your question. Is e-commerce, does it make ability to remember customer behavior? It allows us to do that because we have access to data. And does this make a key factor in making revenue repeat revenue? Like, how much does technology play a role? Because there's an overwhelming question, which is how do you get people to say yes? And does technology here in e-commerce make a difference? So I'd like Seema to answer the overwhelming question of how to get people to say yes. And maybe Alap could discuss how the data helps us recognize consumer behavior and answer the question that Mr. Murali's asked. Okay, so over to you guys.
Yeah. So what I realized is that it's people are normally consistent in their behavior. So their future behavior normally is consistent with their past behavior. Now, what it means is that it's important to have a foot in the door. So as a marketer, if we are able to crack a foot in the door strategy, and we can get people to start engaging with us, maybe buy low cost products, maybe take up a free trial, then once people they develop confidence, then they are also likely to buy higher value products. So consistency is one principle we can use to get people to say yes. Another thing which works very well is creating scarcity. So if things are in abundance, then people don't value it. But if there is some timer which is clicking and it shows that this price is valid only for next 5 days or few hours, then there is a sense of urgency. Otherwise, people think that okay, they will take action, they will buy sometime later, and that day never comes. So creating some scarcity and hence creating an urgency works very well. Then it's important to also price your things appropriately. So, for example, like we discussed about low price products or foot in the door, like Netflix. So, Netflix is built on free trial. Now, why just free products? Maybe there are other strategies like coupon codes. So, coupon codes, they give a lot of thrill. So, if we are able to incorporate these things, which will get that buy in from people, involve them because they have to discover a coupon code and they feel a sense of achievement when they find it, and there is a sense of exclusivity. So, all these things will take people closer to purchase. Yeah, so I think that's all from my side. Alap can tell
And
some
Alap,
more.
a bit about, and maybe you could talk a little bit about the customer behavior and how data helps us, work here. So,
Sure. So, two takeaways from any data activity. The first one is we tend to focus a lot on where we found success when we look at our customers. We tend to overanalyze our sales, whereas the true wealth of information lies in the data where we did not sell. So in any path to purchase, the successful paths to purchase usually land up getting the most attention, whereas the wealth of knowledge that lies in the ones that failed is more prudent. Now, those are the ones that we need to focus on. And if we start focusing on where we lost and start tweaking how we can drive those users to success and get them to say yes, I think that will yield a much more benefit as opposed to trying to figure out. And a very fundamental marketing principle is that there are two types of marketing. One is maintenance marketing, and the other one is growth marketing. And when you're trying and talking about growth, you're talking about prospecting. You're talking about talking to new users and observing their behaviors and unlocking secrets to what they require from us. Now, that means a lot of variation in creative and messaging, where you're testing different messages and looking at the accuracy of a person's mindset, timing. And this is going back to whether gender plays a role or not. Presenting the right product to the right cohort. Now, I personally don't think gender plays a role. I think it's about product and opportunity. As long as you can combine those two, the gender is immaterial. Who you're selling to becomes immaterial. The appeal of the product and the opportunity is greater. So trying to look for signals where you usually are not used to looking at signals, and having a mindset of prospecting and looking for new users as opposed to putting the entire burden on your existing users are much better e-commerce strategies.
okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I really like the fact that you said we like to focus on the success. And that's true. That's where everybody, I mean, it's very uncomfortable to think, I lost so many clients because I behaved stupidly. So yeah. I think that's also, there's a bias the way we even look at data. So thank you for answering that question. I thought it was very timely. And thanks to Cliff, we got the question right. Our next question is really, it's again a more practical type of question. So I'm going to ask this to you, Alap, and then give Seema some time to come back with the academic news. But the question is, and somebody's written a very nice question, and I'll just read out his question and then go into mine, which is by Rishabh Ray Kumar, a student from IIM Lucknow. Nice to have young people also. And he's written, can e-commerce help in reducing the cost of customer acquisition and increasing customer lifetime value by creating hooks? I'm sure that's something that Seema covers in her chapters in IMB, and so do you. But I think it segues very nicely in the question I wanted to ask, which is, in the book, there's an entire chapter on how consumers perceive you. Now, it's fascinating because it's not a simple, linear way by which people look at you. So, Alap, here's a practical question. A lot of my clients in FMCG and apparel space post lockdown moved en masse to platforms like Amazon and Myntra and many more. Now, it was the great white hope. We thought we will now become like global players, etc., etc. But unfortunately, many of them, they didn't see much fill-up in sales, definitely not in profitability. So my question to you would be, someone who's worked with so many people, can you answer this question and tell us how can they get their act together? And perhaps also touch upon the question that Rishabh asked, is that does e-commerce really help in reducing cost of customer acquisition? Or is it just only there for really big brands who can afford it? So over to you.
All right. So I'm safely going to assume that Rishabh's question was more generic and not aimed at smaller e-commerce companies, because usually the cost of acquisition and the reduction of cost of acquisition is a very lazy way of trying to do digital marketing. What you're doing is you're saying that I can only increase my profits not by growing sales but by growing margins, and the easiest way to grow margins is to reduce your cost of sale. Whereas, in fact, the right way to go about doing digital marketing is to try and figure out what is an acceptable and profitable cost of sale, and trying to hit that number even if your numbers are lower, because that's going to increase your ability to penetrate into newer audiences and attract new customers. Now, to your question, Amazon is extremely attractive to a lot of brands, but Amazon takes that pound of flesh. And what they will give you is they'll give you the ability to tease. Now, the nearest parallel I can bring to this is before OTTs came about, what they did was they experimented a lot with YouTube. They put the content up on YouTube, looked at what the uptake is like, collected a lot of analytics and behavior that YouTube was more than happy to contribute to them, learned about the appeal that content has, built future plans, and then invested in building their own OTT and pulled content out of YouTube. Now, Amazon, if the kind of business that you're running and the kind of brands that you're running are not compulsive or don't address to a niche or can't use the intrinsic benefits of a platform like Amazon, like the ability to sell to people who are in market and hyper focus on those people, it's not going to solve your demand problem. Amazon does not automatically. Listing on Amazon is like saying, I've opened my shop and now people will pour in. That's not true. You need to tell people that you're now available here. That is a part of marketing. And once people know that you're available here, all of the other benefits of being on Amazon kick in. And that's when you're reducing their barriers of conversion had you started D2C in the first place. So the selection of Amazon, and all retailers look at Amazon as a frenemy. Right, I can't live without them, but I have to work with them. But in reality, I think, and this also is to Rishabh's point, e-commerce, Amazon, these are channels of sales. Offline used to be a channel of sale. Affiliates are a channel of sale. As long as you treat them as a channel of sale and look at the overall picture of what your sales look like, I think you will always be healthy. And if you're still not healthy, then you need to try and investigate what's the underlying cause. And that's where Seema's book kicks in. Are you pressing the right motivators and triggers to create desire for your product? And then is that desire converting on all of these channels? And that will give you the answer that you're looking for.
Yeah, so Rishabh, this is very interesting question. And of course, one can have an objective to drive growth, but there is no harm in also having an objective of profit maximization. So if, for example, like SDFC Bank may want to maximize profit, and that is why they want to focus on upsell, cross-sell, whereas an ICICI Bank may be driven more by growth strategy, so maximizing market share. So both these objectives are fine, but in order to maximize your profit, of course, you have to reduce your customer acquisition cost. And what is more important is that you should have variety of products. and sort of create a value ladder. So you should have some products which are targeted at fence sitters and cold audience. So the risk is minimized and they are willing to enter into your funnel with low cost products. Then you should have some products which are in the middle. So they are for people who have already bought your free products or low cost products. Now they have more trust and they are willing to spend more and take some more risk, right? And then very high value products where real margins are. So it's important to have multiple products, and it's important to have a omni channel strategy. So I personally found email to be very effective. So if we are able to build a long very healthy email list of potential customers and existing customers, then we keep on building affinity with them by periodically sending out newsletters, and we can push them from low value products to high value. And over a period of time, people will buy. They buy one product at a time. If they are happy, they will buy another product at later point in time. Yeah, because otherwise it's very difficult to recover entire cost of customer acquisition in one transaction. It is not possible. Normally, the first sale may give you even a loss, but you can recover it in subsequent sales.
That makes a lot of sense, Seema. In fact, your book, you've also covered pricing and discounting as an entire chapter. So those of you who are thinking about pricing, you can actually focus on that. My question, I'm just going back to you, Alap. You said something really awesome. You said that we must treat everything like a channel of sale, whether it's an Amazon, whether it's brick and mortar. So I'm going to the question which has been asked by Divya Khanna, one of the people who are participating today. And she's a planner, a strategist, and a writer. And her question is very well written, just to be expected from a writer, is that is there any big difference in our buying behavior online and offline, especially for consumers who may be using both channels? And I think this is something which we kind of really want to know.
Um, Very implicitly, there is. Like I said, the offline purchase is literally ritualistic. I give you an example that I see almost every day. There's a Starbucks just around the corner. People dress up to go to Starbucks, right? It's a coffee, probably 10, 15 minutes at the coffee store, but people dress up to go there. When they're sitting at home and ordering the same thing from Swiggy, there's a whole different mindset. At that time, you just want coffee. And when you're going offline, you want the experience. So offline is an opportunity for you to make your customers feel special, because they've taken the pains to come to you and to attend to you, and they're probably going to transact with you. That makes that experience all the more special, and which is why what you do is you try and make that experience about everything that your brand represents. So Starbucks represents youth, fun, and novelty, and that's what they deliver. Similarly, if your offline retail store, regardless of what you're selling, can deliver that experience of what your brand is, that's what inspires true loyalty. We must respect, especially now, if someone's walking into your offline store, despite a million hurdles, like traffic and availability of transport was used to be the problem. Now there's a pandemic we need to go through. So if there is somebody who's taking that risk and coming to you, it's an extremely valuable relationship that they're starting with you, and you should treat it that way. Online, however, there are some liberties that you can take, because what people want is people want pace, convenience, speed, privacy, the understanding of where they picked off, recommendations of what they could purchase. There are many other things that you could do. There you can take cues from your offline, and mostly this is for people who who were pure offline first and are starting D2C or starting Amazon. Take the best of the experiences you've created and see how you can replicate them here, because that's what consumers are going to remember between the offline and online experience. That there is a consistency in language, tonality, and attitude that carries from the offline brand into the online universe. And when they come there, try and see how close an experience you can give them to being in store. Packaging for Starbucks works a lot. Virtual fitting rooms where you're actually telling them how others have found clothes fitting would be brilliant. Showing three different pictures of different of models of different sizes, trying on the same outfit is a whole lot more productive than having someone who is impossibly thin trying out the garment. Right? So being more realistic and giving people that fair opportunity, which is equivalent to what is offline, would be very precious.
Yeah. So normally online is primed to be cheaper. So people have this perception that if they are buying online, prices have to be 15-20% cheaper than offline. So, in my research, I found that studies have proven that this, in fact, is true. So, people perceive online to be cheaper. Number one. Number two, decision making in online can be more informed because you have so much information which is available, and people resort to online reviews, forums, communities, word of mouth. So decision making is more informed, whereas when it is offline, it is more experiential. So people want touch and feel of the product, and they want to experience the product, they want to try it out, and then buy. So offline buying is also a sort of socializing. So it is like a weekend getaway. So people are bored in their homes and they want a break, and so it becomes a social event. Whereas online buying, sometimes it's more like a chore. So you have a task to be done, you have an activity to be performed, and you want it to be done as quickly as possible. Yeah, so these are some differences. Although now lines are blurring, and because of AR, VR, so we can have experiential marketing even in online, like Sephora. So it allows people to apply lipstick and see how the shade will look on the tone of the face. So Lenskart and Home Depot and all these examples we are familiar with.
So I'm going back to you, Alap. I'm sorry. There's something which really stuck with me when you said that people dress up to go to Starbucks. I'm really guilty of that. I'll definitely not go out in my sad looking clothes. I'll do even video calls. Wearing just a clean shirt. But for Starbucks, well, well dressed. So here the question, I'm going to something which has been sent by Rishabh Jain, who's a senior associate for MSCI. He's posted this at 12:17 p.m. I hope he's still listening because he said something which I feel I would really love you to answer. He's written, e-commerce doesn't give the experience of shopping which humans are tuned to for thousands of years. So how is e-commerce able to break into that very ingrained behavior? I think Seema's already answered some of it, but maybe you could give us some more from a tech point of view.
Specifically to answer Rishabh's question, Rishabh, think of digital as the evolution of shopping, right? There were things that we were doing, and obviously the whole race is evolving. There are so many behaviors that we are conditioning. Case in point, you would never have thought you would get into a stranger's car and pay for them to take you somewhere, right? This is a stranger, you don't know. An application said, here's this guy. Yes, taxis existed before that, but before that, there were always people who are accompanying you to get to some place. Think of Airbnb, right? I'm going to go and live, or rather, I'm going to permit a stranger to enter my house and live with me or live next to me, and I'm going to make some money out of it. It's unheard of and unimaginable for the human race to think that where we usually apply locks and we lock our doors and windows at night, now we are saying, okay, strange guy, please pay me to come into my house and live with me. So we are changing behaviors based on needs, necessity, the changing dynamics of trust. Social media basically opening up the review economy and allowing you to score people, individuals, which again was very rare. And obviously there are extreme ways of how that could go wrong. But where it's going right now is you can establish peer trust. It's the wisdom of crowds that is helping you and enabling a lot of these things. So there is very little to do with technology and a lot to do with how human behavior is changing and how a lot of subliminal triggers have been used to create e-commerce as a viable opportunity, an option to markets. For example, the entire concept of an aisle, I'm still trying to figure out how an aisle what's the digital equivalent of an aisle. Someday I'll probably sit down and think about it. But at the moment, there is no equivalent of an aisle. Think of your cell phone. Your cell phone can show 6 products at one time. And there is an ocean underneath that you can't even peep into. So when you've got only 6 products at a time, you're building your own aisle as you go by using wish lists, by using frequently ordered items, recommendations. These are building aisles as you browse, which are personalized to you. So there are a lot of things that e-commerce brings to the shopping experience that you would never have got before. That is what's powering this change. I hope that answers your question.
I I think you've answered it comprehensively between you and Seema. I have another question, which is again being generated, and I think it takes up from what you're talking of. Both of you spoke of how consumer generated feedback and testimonials play a big role. But we have two people who have actually written, including Vinay Gupta, who is the manager India operations for 48. I want to know, don't you think fake reviews can hamper the brand in a big way? It will break trust. And this has come again about there, which is by Vinay Rao. Once again, fake positive reviews is a major concern. So I think word of mouth online via comments, too many fake ones. So I think one of the points which both of you mentioned at different points. So first, I'd like you to answer, Seema, because you began it by talking about how we can use testimonials to build trust. And when you spoke of the way we process data, you said it's in three stages: the reptile brain, which is about fear, then it comes the middle brain, which is about liking, and then emotions from the neocortex. So my question to you is, if the number one thing which we are frightened of is losing face or failure, etc., and we have to build trust and we are doing it through testimonials, how do we handle it today when people are buying fake testimonials and at the same time they're screwing up our brand by writing bad things about us? So how do we manage this? I mean, kuch idea hai? Because it's like as he said, double edged. It's this way, that way. So how do you handle it?
Yes, online reputation management is one of the biggest challenges that any marketer is facing. And that is because there is anonymity, people can write whatever they want, and there is definitely an abuse of this review and testimonials. So many testimonials are fake. So, as consumers, they will probably look for the number of reviews. So, if a brand or a product has got only 10 reviews, then you can't really trust and base your decision on them. But if there are 400, 500 reviews, then it gives you more confidence. And then another thing consumers should look forward to is whether there is a balance between positive and negative comments or all are positive. So if everything is very hunky dory, then something is dicey. लेकिन बीच बीच में कुछ नेगेटिव कमेंट्स हैं if there are suggestions for how the product can be improved and some practical limitations, then it's more credible. So quantity and then balance, and also the words which are used in review. So if the reviews are automated, if they are generated by a bot, or if they are fake, they will have very sort of artificial language, and everything will be like written in perfect English. Jabki real users, they don't write like that, right? So the way they will write is more experiential. So they will explain the challenges they faced while they were using the product. So one has to see all these things to judge to what extent reviews and ratings can be trusted. But yes, I agree, this is a big challenge, and I'm sure we will improve over time. The whole digital ecosystem will improve on this.
Yeah, I think very well said, both of you. In fact, I'm just reading something which V. Raghunathan, the professor V. Raghunathan, has written. He's written another key difference between online and offline shopping, in my opinion, is that online shopping is probably more amenable to one turning a shopaholic as opposed to, it's quite clear I can spend, as you're saying, blue light shopping away and suddenly finding there's no money left. So I think what you're trying to say in your book as well is that there are dynamics to online and offline shopping. It's a complex behavior, and online is something which I think Alap has said we are learning every day, something which is new and we've never really understood so much about it. There's a question which has been asked. I've got two more questions before I'll go, into the ending thing. We have got like, I think, 14 minutes to go. So there's a very specific question asked by someone who has attended many of your sessions and has read your blog. And she works in the building material business. And she had asked me to specifically ask you this question, is that what happens when an established company wants to move online? And by wants to move online means they normally sell, like companies like building materials would sell brick or cement and stuff like that. They normally sell through retail stores. But today with the pandemic and the fact that there is a lot of direct to consumer, how are people making that shift? And what do you advise for established companies? We've spoken a lot about startups. How do established companies go about it? In your book, you have talked a lot about how there is a science to buying. There is a science in marketing and how you can get people to say yes. But how does an established company, which does not traditionally sell direct to consumers, now move and start selling direct to consumers? Do you have any suggestions on this? You have covered it in your book where you talk of use of the art of fascination in marketing, memory and marketing. So perhaps if you could talk a little bit about the non-traditional, non-B2C, more of B2B type who are now going direct.
So I'm saying digital is all about taking baby steps. So what works in digital is not to try and make a perfect blueprint, because nothing is perfect in digital world. Because every day, like Alap said, we are constantly learning. So digital is all about getting real time feedback and learning on the go, improvising on the go. So established companies, they should identify what are the priority channels and activities in digital world, so that they don't feel overwhelmed. So, baby steps may be starting with a website presence, having a website, and making a face discoverability. So, when people are searching in Google, at least they find you online. And then identifying whether your target audience is more on Facebook, or is it more on Instagram, or is it more on LinkedIn. It's not necessary you have to be everywhere, because digital can be very overwhelming. Even for people who make a living out of digital like me, there are just too many things to do. So it's important to get the focus right. So if your target audience is on LinkedIn, just focus on LinkedIn and crack it. And only after you're comfortable on the platform, with the you can open up your presence on another platforms. So I think the mantra is 1% improvement every day. So at the end of the year, you will have 365% improvement, rather than trying to perfect the strategy, have a perfect blueprint, and then it becomes a non-starter.
Okay, I think I'll move over to you, Alap. So my question to you is, taking this forward, is there a, and this question has been asked by Vivish, a consumer insight professional, who is an independent consultant, and he's written something very interesting. Is there a volume and value variation in the purchase at brick and mortar versus e-commerce store? And in which categories? Because I think, especially for B2B companies also, this is very relevant. We just keep talking of B2C, but B2B also uses e-commerce in a big way. So any questions on your thoughts?
I personally think we've tried to look at variations or similarities. There are some similarities that we can draw. Let me zoom out a little bit, and instead of going about specific categories and how people behave offline and online, let's look at what kind of behaviors have been created by other platforms who've managed to reach these people. I think the Amazon for B2B, people used to think is Alibaba, but I think that space is still vacant, especially for India. Because B2B users, there are platforms like Vishkarma that will allow B2B participants, especially in the building and construction industry, who can list their services and products and then be discovered and then have the opportunity to participate in RFPs. However, where I see there is a limitation is that what Amazon did was Amazon actually thought best practices for the consumer in a B2C environment and then implemented that and then learned along the way, tweaking things like reducing purchase friction using one-click ordering. In India, one-click ordering was not available, so they created a wallet. So there have been a lot of innovations that they've done along the way as they've realized how consumers want to shop and how quickly they want to own and receive the products that they've purchased. Similarly, in the B2B environment, what is the project cycle of that industry? How does that industry do purchase? Most B2B goes through intense uh, how do I say this? They go through intense procurement processes and RFPs that usually are multi-stage processes, which are not lending themselves very comfortably to e-commerce. So what you're then talking about is only speaking to a certain MSME economy where these guys buy online without this, and they use a lot of what traditional e-commerce is: reviews, peer feedback, word of mouth. They use all of those to purchase. So enterprise will still always be the RFP model. At some point in time, someone will figure out how to internet enable large scale tenders. But until then, right now, it's just the MSME that is available to such businesses, and to cater to them would be nice.
So I was saying B2B marketing is generally more about thought leadership. It's more amenable to content marketing vis-a-vis B2C. because consumer is not interested in knowing too much about, say, FMCG products. So we may be buying a soap or a shampoo, but we don't care how much fatty acid a soap has. But a big ticket B2B item, people do intense research. So content marketing and thought leadership marketing works very well in online. And another shift is B2B is more about lead generation, because the transaction is not completed online. So people are looking at generating leads, phone numbers, and email IDs so that they can be followed up and converted into paid customers.
Thank you, Seema. I think you answered the question really nicely between you and Alap, that there are some dynamics inherent to B2B and B2C, and you can't just take what works in one into the other. You have to adjust for what your category and your dynamics are asking. So let me ask you a question. I'm going back, Seema, to your book, which is on fulfilling our needs. It's a very nice chapter, chapter 9 on why do you buy, where you talk of how people shop for desire, people shop on behalf of others, people shop to be social, they shop for many reasons. So my question to you is, maybe between you and Alap, you could talk a little bit about this addiction on social media of and addiction to buy. I can be honest and say that I've taken to buying all sort of rubbish in during the lockdown, not high ticket items, but it just gives you a little bit of joy. Okay, it's very small, but I mean, I understand now. When I was going to the question which was asked, like addictive behavior, uh, is that a concern? I mean, we read about selfies becoming addictive behavior, okay, and many things like that, which we are seeing on social media. But what about online shopping, especially when you're cooped up at home and you have nothing much to do? How do you? Is this a real problem? And how can you be sensitive to it? So between Seema as from a behavioral point of view and Alap from a business point of view, some
Yeah.
thoughts, please.
So, very interesting point. Studies have shown that basically social media releases a chemical called as dopamine, and dopamine is the chemical which gives pleasure. So, it is proven that social media consumption gives pleasure to people, and that is why people are addicted to it. That is why, on an average, people are spending 2 to 3 hours on Facebook or Instagram. Similarly, social media consumption also releases love chemical, which is oxytocin. So these are all pleasure hormones. So definitely they are very addictive. So people are addicted. They spend a lot of time, and then it will lead to compulsive buying. So I think as individuals, we have to realize that this is a challenge. See, if you look at, say, popular social media platforms like Facebook, now why the color of the platform is blue? Because blue is very soothing, and blue will make you spend more time on the platform. Why LinkedIn also uses blue? Because the color psychology says that these colors are very soothing because they are cool colors, and they make you spend more time and feel you make you feel very comfortable, and you trust. Banks all have blue colors. So everywhere all these things are happening. So as consumers, we have to be more we have to understand and not get manipulated. We have to exercise self restraint. Like, I use social media for professional purposes. I don't spend so much time on my personal profile. I don't go and share everything or every activity I do on my personal handles. So we have to have focus and prioritization.
Alap, any thoughts on how companies are maximizing on this?
Uh, I think the wrong companies are trying to latch on to addictive behavior. Look, I personally think, and this is what Dr. Raghunath also said, that online shopping is amenable to people who are shopaholics. Shopaholics are basically seeking what Seema said. They're looking for a dopamine hit from the ownership of a new item, which lasts for a couple of days, after which the new item goes into a drawer, and all of the nice feelings, the fuzzy feelings that you got with buying that item have gone away, and you're looking for your next fix. There was, and this has had predecessors, right? And I think there is a pattern of user behavior of people who are, and this is where I think the dark side of social media comes in, where constantly looking at people pretending to be happy is making you question your own life's consistency and quality. And what that's doing is that's then pushing you into buying these products, that's making you think that those products are going to give you the joy, and then they don't give you the joy, and then that vicious cycle continues. What you really want to do is you want to try and understand what are the kind of people that are latching on to this. Now, for example, this existed in print. The bottom right of a quarter pager, like, on the first page of every newspaper at one time, landed up becoming a Reebok kit, where for $9.99 you'd get shoes, a bag, sweatpants, a sweatshirt, and some other things. And you'd be like, good Lord, that's brilliant value. That pulled Reebok's brand down so terribly that it took years. In fact, I think Reebok is still suffering from that. They're a kit manufacturer. They're for gifts and they're for corporate gifts. That mindset's still not gone. Before this, on television, tele-shopping networks have already existed where they've sold low-ticket, high dopamine products with great visuals and great stories and narratives to people who are susceptible to these purchases. What the pandemic has taught us is everybody cooped up in their houses with no real ability to go out and interact are participating in e-commerce to get the same dopamine hit in addition to what they need compulsively. Now that shows that the underlying problem is that introverts who are closeted are the ones who are exhibiting this behavior. Do you really want those people to be your primary customer? Because those people, if you try and engineer your entire, even a large part of your budget only to appealing this segment of people, you might land up creating a segment that will probably go away the minute the lockdown lifts and people are out again. And all of the money that you invested in trying to appeal to this with low cost products, that's going to go away. So be careful about where you're trying to spend that money and see whether that behavior is sustainable or not. And I think that is a more long-term strategy than otherwise.
I think you brought in about a lot of perspective, because right now we are living in the lockdown and we think it's going to be there forever. But in reality, it'll come and go. So yes, we need to think beyond the immediate. And I think what Seema also said makes a lot of sense. I like the fact that he spoke about blue as a color. And I was thinking Air Meat is beautifully designed. And this platform is in various shades of blue with a bit of red. And it looks very pretty. And I think there's a lot of color psychology which goes into design as well. So my last question to you, Seema, we've spent a very pleasant one. I've tried to get as many questions answered as possible. If I've missed out anybody's questions, I'm really, really sorry. But my last question to you, Seema, is what would be the top 3 takeaways from your book, and why we should run out and read how people buy online right now? So over to you, Seema. Any suggestions, and what are the top 3 takeaways?
So number one takeaway for everybody could be it's all about brand building plus balancing it with transactional marketing. So marketing, when we say digital, it seems very transactional. So we are talking of e-commerce, driving sales, generating leads, conversions. But marketing is a lot about brand building, and their emotions play a very significant role. So, as a marketer, if we can balance the two, the rational as well as the emotional side, then we are looking at short term strategy as well as long term strategy. So, we are able to get some sales for short run. At the same time, we are able to build the brand for the long term. So, that is number one. Number two, personalization is here to stay, and if we can personalize our strategy, because the days of mass marketing are over. So how do we build consumer personas? How do we segment? How do we target our customers? How do we customize our messaging strategy, our offer? So we have to think through all of those things. And there was a question also, very interesting question from, I think, Vivishnavel. Sorry, I am not getting your name correctly. Basically, critical points in a buyer's journey that are barriers and motivators. So, if we understand our consumer personas, then we will also understand their buyers and their motivators and barriers. And so, personalization is the key. And third significant takeaway would be overcoming fear. I think because I've also had some stints in e-commerce, and we were trying to solve consumer problem. But later, when I was writing the book, I realized that there is no point of doing all this marketing unless the basic fears are overcome. So have a proper return policy, have proper warranty, build trust, get testimonials in place. Unless these things are in place, pricing and these things won't work. So these are the three takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Seema. Alap, I just want to ask you one last question to you as well. Is when we read about the book, when we read the book on how people buy online, it's a fabulous book. It's available for anyone to buy online right now and read it. I just want to ask you, when we are reading a book like this, where a lot of theoretical examples, case studies have been shared, as a digital marketing professional, as an expert, do you think we should keep some questions in mind when we read this book so that it could become more productive for us, uh, like uh, like how we would perhaps study in the ancient days? So, any suggestions on when we read this book, what should we keep in mind, and how should we get the most from a book like this?
That's a brilliant question. When I was reading the book at that time, I was making a very classical book reader's mistake, and I was relating this with my own examples and how I'm immediately going to fix all the wrong in my life with all of the knowledge that I've achieved in this book. I believe the one thing that we've lost as marketers is the gumption and courage to make mistakes. And in our requirement to avoid mistakes, we've forgotten that we have to test what we are learning to see whether it's effective and applicable to our lives and our businesses. And whatever Seema has taught, I believe that can be tested before scaled. And if you can test before scaling anything, you do it at a lower cost. You're forgiven the mistakes that you're making. You can roll back. And finally, you will have more data to substantiate any further decisions in the same line that you would make based on the knowledge that you've got from the book. So I think have a mindset of testing what you've learned at a small scale and then see if you can inflate it. That will always be a great way for you to know whether this works for you or not. Don't curse the author when it doesn't work. Just do it the right way.
Thank you, Alap. I think that was a lovely way of summing it up. That we can't just fix everything. We got to take some risks in life, and I think it's very important to keep a positive mindset, even if terrible things are happening around us. Because I mean that's how we will survive, right? I mean we have survived far worse things than a lockdown and stuff like this. We have survived as a race. We have survived so many things. So I think what you're saying is to keep moving ahead, learn from the best, learn from people like Professor Seema Gupta, listen to people like Alap Ghosh, but go out and make mistakes and learn from our own experiences. So, on that note, I would like to thank both Professor Seema Gupta, who is a professor from IMB, and Alap Ghosh, who is also a professor, visiting professor at IMB, for this fascinating talk on how people buy online. I'd also like to thank Benedict for inviting me to host this session where I fabulously learned a lot. And it was very nice because while I love the book, I think both of you also brought a lot of practical answers to existing problems. A big thank you to Airmate as a platform partner. It was very easy for me to use, and I am always risk averse to trying new things. So I thought it was fabulous. I love the question answer session. And another thank you to Caleb as a library partner. Over to you, Benedict. And once again, thank you so much for organizing this wonderful session during these difficult times.
Thanks so much, Rini. You did a wonderful job. Thanks to the audience for staying till the end. And this has been the most interactive session so far. And I'm sure we're going to improve going forward and get better from here. Thanks for the amazing experience. Thanks, Alap. Thanks, Seema. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you.
lovely audience. They asked so many questions, and thanks, Rini. It was wonderful the way you hosted and engaged all of us. Thanks, Benedict, for the opportunity, and thanks, Alap, for taking out time.
Anytime, Seema. Thank you, Reni and Benedict, and all the attendees. Please add us on LinkedIn if you need to, but please make sure you write that you're from NBNC so that we don't think you're spammers trying to sell us something. Yeah?
And we are going to send out the links of the video to everybody, all the attendees.
Sure.